Gengar. Gengar is an elusive and tricky glass cannon who excels at using his versatile toolkit to overwhelm opponents and push them into corners, testing their limits and forcing them to constantly guess where and how he'll attack next. On top of his plethora of tricky hitboxes and disjoints, Gengar's main tool in any fight is his speed, allowing him to move in and out of combat at his own pace, and force his opponent to play the game on his terms. And while he might not sport the highest damage output in the game, Gengar's ability to cripple his foes and capitalize on mistakes far better than the majority of the cast make him a threat in any matchup. While he might be terrifying once he's in control, Gengar is, however, a character who cannot afford to make mistakes, as his very low weight value and poor defensive options can make only a couple of openings lead to a huge loss of momentum at best, and an early stock disadvantage at worst. As a Gengar player, it's your job to stay on your opponents as much as possible, all while doing everything in your power to keep the momentum of the match in your favor. Thankfully, Gengar's options are more than powerful enough to completely dominate a fight if he's put in the hands of a skilled player, but getting to this point will be a steep hill to climb for those looking to play him at a higher skill level. Gengar stands as a medium-sized semi-humanoid character, with its height being just a bit shorter than that of characters like Luigi and Sonic. Standing tall as the Pokemon series' original Ghost-type Pokemon, Gengar has had a very long legacy of being a terrifying combatant in his home franchise. Not even the removal of Levitate has been enough to slow this guy down, as he has never dropped below UU throughout the entirety of the series. This is thanks to his very strong damage output, and more notably, his fantastic speed stat. And these are both aspects that Gengar will bring along with him to Smash as well. These strengths are complemented by Gengar's main weapon of choice, with these being his manipulation over ghostly energy, full-body charges, and most importantly, his long tongue. On top of that, Gengar will float off the ground when he's moving around the screen, and since his feet don't have hurt boxes, the player might be able to bypass incoming lows as they rush across the stage, much like the Inklings can avoid aerials. However, as amazing as his offensive capabilities are, Gengar's defensive options by contrast are incredibly weak, and this translates to a character that can definitely be coined as a glass cannon. While not every Pokemon has been translated one for one to Smash in terms of stat distribution, Gengar thankfully fits the archetype quite well, given his wide variety of powerful abilities and his rather unpredictable nature as a fighter. And it seems that I'm not the only one to think that, as that's exactly what Gengar turned out to be in Pokken as well. Regardless, it's the ideal design choice for a Pokemon like Gengar, and in terms of mobility options, Gengar will have 2 jumps along with the ability to wall jump and crawl. As he is a glass cannon, Gengar's ability to stay in the fight is extremely low once he loses momentum and is put on the back foot, meaning that, unless you are constantly in control of a match, your chances of survival are next to none. However, as Smash is fairly different from your traditional fighting game, there are notably more factors that need to be taken into account when considering a character's balance. As a result, I felt it would be a bit unfair if the player didn't at least have a chance of keeping themselves in the fight, especially given the technical prowess needed to play this character at a high level. And thankfully, Gengar's design as a ghost-type Pokemon actually lends itself perfectly to a mechanic that will not only devour the hope of his opponents, but also take a bit of their well-being as a souvenir. This is Gengar's character mechanic, Hungering Shadows. At its core, Hungering Shadows is a longevity mechanic that is based on a common trope of ghost-type Pokemon, which is the fact that they're known for feasting on the souls of the living in various ways, and Gengar is no exception. As a result, Gengar will play into his type's reputation and take a bit of his opponent's life force for himself, with each of his attacks striking his opponent's soul and healing him for 15% of the damage dealt. This passive leech is proportional to the attack that Gengar performs. And for those that might be concerned about this passive healing, let's quickly run the numbers and avoid any unneeded claims of competitive strength. Hypothetically, let's say that Gengar has an attack that has him strike his opponent with a horizontal tongue strike, and this attack does a total of 13.7 damage. With Hungering Shadows, Gengar will heal for a total of 2.055%, or 2.01% rounded up, which is fairly small. While this can add up over time, it won't take much for your opponent to make up for said damage if they get the upper hand, so no amount of leech is going to keep you alive if you don't know how to tip the battle in your favor. It should also be known that Hungering Shadows only works on physical attacks, as projectiles will simply deal damage and not do anything to help Gengar's longevity. But it should also be noted that Gengar is in possession of abilities that will allow him to heal for bigger chunks of health, including but not limited to, opponents inflicted with one of Gengar's various detrimental effects, which will bump up the effect from 15% healing to 20% for the effect's duration. These have been the basics of Gengar as a fighter, an offensive powerhouse who sports a blend of great stats, strong buttons, and a passive leech that can keep him going for a very long time if his player knows what they're doing. In turn, Gengar's middling defensive potential means that his survivability is entirely dependent on how well his player can dance around their opponents and pressure them when they leave openings. If you perform well, this character will reward you for doing well, but if you struggle or are just starting out, you won't fully get to make use of all the options this character provides. As a result, Hungering Shadows is not a comeback mechanic, it's a dominance mechanic, and the more you dominate, the more you can instill fear in your opponents. Now that these aspects of Gengar have been covered in full, let's now move on to his normals and discuss the attacks that will make use of this terrifying mechanic. Gengar's normals will mainly be comprised of 3 forms of attack, with these being strikes from his tongue, charging into foes with his body, and morphing his ethereal form in various ways. This includes, but is not limited to, morphing his arms into huge monstrous claws, greatly extending the spines on his back, and even manifesting terrifying illusions to really put the fear of Arceus in his opponents. Gengar's neutral combo is Spectre Strike Combination, a quick close-range sequence that will have Gengar perform a pair of claw slashes, striking fast before transitioning into an endless combo, with this having Gengar release a constant stream of burning hot wisps from his mouth to rack up damage. To end the combo, Gengar will unleash a massive blast of wisps from his mouth to send his opponents flying, with the wisps shaping into a fist as they drive into their opponent's face. This combo's main strength is the incredible speed of the first 2 strikes, with its 2-frame startup allowing Gengar to stop attacks at close range and deal some fairly decent damage in the process. But outside of this speed, its short range means you're going to need to get very close in order to make sure your opponent doesn't fall out of it. As a result, this combo is a high risk for a fairly average reward, so it's best used as bait to lure your opponents closer when you have your back to the ledge. Gengar's forward tilt is Lashing Lick, a dangerous poke option that will have Gengar extend and swing his tongue out in front of himself, with this attack covering a wide range and leaving a trail of wisps and poisonous sludge behind it. Thanks to the disjoint provided by Gengar's tongue, this is one of the Spectre's best poke options, and a great way to safely check buttons and win trades against overly aggressive foes. And at lower percents, the player will be able to chase with other normals or a few of Gengar's specials. Despite this, however, it's Gengar's slowest grounded normal in the recovery, meaning it might end up getting punished if blocked at close range. Gengar's up tilt is Tongue Flip, a quick yet dangerous attack that will have Gengar bend backwards, all while extending his tongue and swinging it up over his head, launching any nearby foe up into the air on hit. This move will hit fast and cover a solid range, with it surrounding Gengar's hurtbox as he attacks, and providing the player with a fantastic combo starter, all while also granting the player a great anti-air option to stuff jump into and prevent an opponent from landing. It's still fairly unsafe if blocked at close range, however, so do be careful with your spacing. Gengar's down tilt is Spectre Sweep, a deceptive attack that will have Gengar slide forward along the ground, his tongue extended in front of himself, and knocking out the balance of any opponent unlucky enough to be in its path. This attack will cover a solid amount of range, and thanks to the disjoint provided by Gengar's tongue, the player can use this attack to jump on opponents either trying to play keep away, or stuff the buttons of a zoner who just wants to charge his projectiles and is unwilling to approach. It also serves as a fantastic combo star thanks to the move's low knockback growth and launch angle, but as amazing as it is if used effectively, it does have some things that hold it back from being dominant. This comes in the form of its poor shield damage, and the need to commit to a rushing dash, as pushing a character as squishy as Gengar into punish range is never a good idea. It's the definition of high risk versus high reward, so make sure you use it when your opponent has next to no chance to react to it. Gengar's dash attack is Sinister Strike, a dangerous gap closing attack that will have Gengar cloak himself in spectral energy, all before charging forward and barreling through all opponents in his path. This move's greatest strength is its fantastic horizontal range, as like the dash attacks of characters like Kirby, Gengar will retain a consistent hitbox while rushing forward, allowing him to stuff buttons, and turn even the slightest mistake into a potentially lost stock if his opponent's percent is high enough. On top of that, this move's speed is incredibly fast, with Gengar moving almost 2/3 of your average battlefield type stage in roughly a second's time, and catching all but the fastest of buttons. Don't think you can just throw it out haphazardly, however, as opponents who can see it coming can punish its fairly low priority. For his get-up attacks, Gengar will spin around on his back, attacking with either a kick or a slash from his clawed hands, all while performing a tongue sweep for his ledge attack. For his smash attacks, Gengar will utilize large, visually impressive attacks, courtesy of his ability to manipulate ghostly energy and morph various parts of his body, all while creating portals to extend his range forward and make his abilities pack a bit more punch. While it's up in the air as to whether or not these attacks are actual manifestations or simply just illusions, be assured that the pain they'll inflict on your opponent will be very real. Gengar's forward smash is Shadow Crush, a devastating wall breaker that will have Gengar reel back. Morphing the properties of his arm as a massive hand with 4 sharp fingers emerges from a portal behind him, with it performing a powerful vertical slash and cleaving through any opponent in its path. This attack will cover a decent range in front of Gengar, with the entirety of the arm counting as a disjoint, and providing the player with both a great whiff punishing option and a potent kill option at higher percents. On top of that, this attack will destroy any smaller projectiles it comes into contact with, which can help the player in stinging opponents trying to cover their tracks as they run away. While this can be one of Gengar's strongest stock closes if used effectively, this move's fantastic upsides are in turn balanced with a moderately slow recovery and a small cancel window, meaning that having this move block or whiff at close range could lead to a disastrous punishment. Gengar's up smash is Sinister Claws, another devastating attack that will have Gengar slip both of his arms into dimensional portals, all before causing 2 massive shadow arms to extend up on the ground and clasp their hands together, covering a large range and launching any opponent in the damage path. This move will sport sweet spot at the position where both hands clasp together, with this greatly increasing both the damage and the launch power of the attack, and turning a solid anti-air into Gengar's safest kill confirm thanks to its fantastic disjoint. Despite this, however, the horizontal range of this attack is fairly small, meaning that in order to strike a grounded opponent, they'll need to be very close to Gengar when the attack initiates. As a result, this move is fairly unsafe to use if your opponent isn't above you, so unless you block something at point blank range, it's best to use it as a juggle combo ender if you're looking to confirm that kill. Finally, Gengar's down smash is Spectral Fist, a tricky yet powerful attack that will have Gengar perform a powerful hook punch with his morphed arm, but instead of only hitting once, the arm will disappear into a second portal and swing around to cover Gengar's backside. This move provides Gengar with a fantastic Okizeme option that can set up dangerous frame traps and safely stop get-up attacks thanks to the disjoint provided by the arm, but opponents who are careful might be able to abuse the small blind spot in between both hits. As a result, it's important that you turn around to face your opponent before using this move, so in this way, they're guaranteed to either block the first strike or get their roll stopped by the second one. While he might be a rushdown fighter, Gengar's light, gaseous form grants him a fairly slow fall speed, allowing the Spectre to push his fairly short-range aerials forward a considerable amount. Thanks to this, Gengar can close the gap very quickly and even link multiple aerials together in a single hop, allowing the player to easily pull off ground-to-air conversions and make his opponents double guess just how safe they might be from a range. Top that off with most of his aerials sporting a disjoint, and you've got a character that might prove difficult to clash with once he gets the drop on you. Gengar's neutral air is Spirit Circlet, a quick yet versatile attack that will have Gengar spin around in midair, a series of burning wisps escaping his mouth and dealing multiple hits of damage to any opponent unlucky enough to be too close. This move sports decent range and a solid amount of coverage, with its multi-hit properties allowing it to catch poorly placed sidesteps and lock grounded opponents into a block state. As a result, this move is one of Gengar's safest landing options and one of his best combo stars at low percents, thanks in part to Gengar's ability to follow up this attack with grounded normals. Once the wisps have dealt enough damage, Gengar will conclude the attack by sweeping them back into his mouth with its tongue, with this animation being fully cancelable both on the ground and in the air. Gengar's forward air is Spectre Slash, a dangerous attack that will let Gengar slash out in front of himself, his arm morphed into a large clawed hand in order to extend its range and add on to its impressive potential. With a solid amount of launch power and some decent damage behind it, this is Gengar's main aerial kill confirm and his main way to close out combos at low to mid percents. But while it might pack a punch if it lands, its range is fairly short. As a result, this move will require Gengar to commit to his offense if he wants to close out stocks, and thanks to his very poor defenses, throwing this out at an inopportune time might lead to some serious punishment. Be sure to make use of Gengar's floaty stature to catch opponents with this attack when they least expect it. Gengar's up air is Lick Loop, a quick attack that will have Gengar perform a mid-air backflip, all while his tongue is extended and knocks any nearby opponent up into the air unhit. Striking fast with a short cooldown, this move is mainly designed to be used as a juggling tool that can be performed multiple times in a single jump, and if it's used while moving forward, the player can use this attack to start combos from more than half a screen away. Just mind its short range, however, as it might just get whiff punished if you aren't precise with it. Gengar's back air is Toxic Spines, a dangerous reversal that will have Gengar bend forward as he morphs the spines on his back, causing them to jet out and deal damage to any opponent in their path. This attack will hit hard and hit fast, allowing Gengar to catch opponents trying to jump behind him or catch neutral mistakes as he runs off platforms. And at higher percents, it can also be used as a kill confirm, or earlier if you can catch your opponent off stage with it. Just mind its very short range, as you might spell your own end if you throw it out haphazardly. Finally, Gengar's down air is Shadow Blast, a destructive attack that will have Gengar raise both arms above his head and manifest a Shadow Ball, all before flipping forward and swinging the Shadow Ball in a downward arc. If this volatile ball makes contact with an opponent, it will explode in a wave of damage and spike the opponent on hit, with the attack itself acting as a disjoint that can even hit below the ledge if used out of a short hop. Said disjoint also allows it to safely clash with recoveries, but do mind its landing leg if you try to use it as a landing option. Gengar will grab his opponent by morphing the properties of his arm, with the large appendage extending from a portal and allowing Gengar himself to act independently, all while he performs a lick for his pummel. As for his throws, Gengar will utilize a set of options that, while creative in their design, are fairly straightforward in their purpose. With 3 repositioning tools and 1 throw designed to set up combos, it's definitely nothing to scoff at. But the aspect that sets Gengar's throws apart from others is the fact that Gengar will heal for 50% of the damage they deal. Thanks to this, a potential way to start a combo has the potential to also be a saving grace, as Gengar is a character where every percent you take matters. Gengar's forward throw is Spectre Slingshot, a fairly simple throw option that will have Gengar snare his opponent with his tongue, all before flying backwards and causing the elasticity of his tongue to go taut. Once moving back a set distance, Gengar will let himself fly forward as the grip on his opponent loosens, all before launching them away with a powerful headbutt attack. This throw will deal solid damage and sport solid knockback, with it allowing Gengar to set up offstage kills or even tech chase at lower percents. But the percent threshold in which it becomes a kill confirm is notably high. Far too high for a character as squishy as Gengar to rely upon. As a result, this throw is situational at best, and completely outshined by Gengar's other options at worst. Gengar's up throw is Shadow Uppercut, another fairly simple throw option that will have Gengar melt into a puddle of shadow and move under his opponent's feet. And before they can react, the Spectre will perform a rising punch out of the inky black in order to launch the opponent up into the air. At low to mid percents, the player can potentially use this throw as a combo starter against the game's heavier fighters. But once most fighters pass their mid percent threshold, it will lose its ability to combo and simply become a launching tool. Much like his forward throw, this option's launch power isn't strong enough to confirm kills at percents that are considered safe for Gengar, and as a result, it's a throw that will lose its value quickly into a stock. The healing is still nice though, so it still might have its uses if you need a pick-me-up. Gengar's back throw is Sucker Strike, a tricky yet fun throw option that will have Gengar playfully lick his opponent with his tongue, causing them to shudder as a portion of their soul is devoured by the devious Spectre. And while they're stuck in this physical tick, Gengar will disappear and launch them away with a strike to the back of their head. This throw will deal the most damage out of any of Gengar's options, and by extension, also provide him with the most healing. And on top of said attrition, its knockback growth makes it one of Gengar's best ways to force opponents off stage and into potential offstage kills. It's a versatile option that can do almost anything, except actually confirm kills. As like the previous 2 options, the threshold where this throw becomes a kill option is far too high to be safe, so just stick to it for the healing. Finally, Gengar's down throw is Tongue Tosser, a silly yet useful throw option that will have Gengar wrap his tongue around his opponent. But instead of squeezing the life out of them, he will perform a mid-air flip in order to spin and slam his opponent into the ground. This slam will knock the opponent up into the air from the force, putting them in the prime position for Gengar to perform follow-up attacks and get combos going. And thanks to its low knockback growth, it can be effective even later into your opponent's stock. Top that off with the increased healing from throws and it's a fantastic move all around, but it does deal the least amount of damage out of all of Gengar's throws to compensate. It's now time to talk about Gengar's specials, and much like the Pokemon that came before him, all 4 of his special moves are based on various attacks that Gengar can learn in the Pokemon series. These attacks will provide Gengar with various ways to trap and cripple his opponent's attempts to fight back, including but not limited to inflicting his opponents with various debuffs, mixing up and striking foes when they least expect it, and using their bad habits to greatly improve his self-healing abilities. They also happen to be a valuable part of Gengar's playstyle regardless of the matchup, and should your opponent choose to doubt your abilities, said doubt might become the final curse nail in the fight's coffin. Starting with the neutral special, Gengar will utilize a versatile charge projectile that, while it's simple at face value, can prove to be one of Gengar's most dangerous offensive tools, if his player knows how to make the most of its incredible upsides, that is. Sludge Bomb. With this, Gengar will begin to charge up a ball of volatile sludge in his mouth once the player taps the B button, with the ball growing in size the longer it's charged as Gengar bounces it playfully along his tongue. During this charge animation, the player is capable of cancelling and storing this charge at any point, much like you can with Samus's Charge Shot or Lucario's Aura Sphere. And once the move is fully charged and the B button is tapped again, Gengar will launch out the ball of poison in front of himself, although not quite in the way you might expect. You see, unlike your average energy projectile that travels in a straight path, Sludge Bomb by comparison will travel in an arc through the air before splashing on the ground, creating an outward blast of toxic sludge that will inflict damage to all opponents in its area of effect. As a result, what might look like a simple projectile can also double as a dangerous area control tool, and since Sludge Bomb is affected by gravity, it can be used as an edge guarding tool against opponents trying to recover low. It should also be mentioned that striking an opponent with the ball directly will cause the ball to explode preemptively, all while dealing far more damage than being caught in the splash zone. And while it might lack a lot of the staples of your standard energy projectile, its ability to close out stocks isn't one of them. But what if I were to tell you that there's even more to this move than altered launch properties? You see, just like its home franchise counterpart, Sludge Bomb won't just deal damage to the foe struck, but will also inflict them with a nasty poison debuff that will slowly inflict damage over time. This debuff will last for a total of 5 seconds and inflict a total of 2.5% every second, and while the effects of Sludge Bomb's poisons are active, it cannot be reapplied until the poison has run its course, so don't think you can continuously deluge your opponent in sludge in order to rack up damage quickly. However, the passive damage is only half of the main attraction, because, as previously mentioned, Gengar will gain a boost to his self-healing against opponents inflicted with a stats condition, meaning that said 5-second time window is your cue to go on the offensive and get a long combo going, as nothing will put fear in your opponent's heart like falling behind even further in a match, or having the gap closed depending on the situation. Just don't get in over your head, as while making the most of the time frame is important, getting reckless and throwing whatever advantage you had down the toilet can be a heartbreaking way to lose your stock. Moving on to his side special, Gengar will utilize a devious mix-up option that can start combos, punish mistakes in the neutral, and generally make it difficult for opponents to lock him down. All it takes is for you to blink and you're bound to be on the receiving end of a nasty case of broken hubris. Phantom Force. With this, Gengar will take a combat-ready stance before rushing forward, his body slipping into the shadows as he disappears from sight. Gengar will be fully invulnerable to all forms of damage once he fades into the darkness, and after a brief moment to build up tension, Gengar will reappear in a location chosen by the player and unleash a powerful claw slash. But just where will he reappear, I wonder? In total, the player is capable of performing up to 5 unique follow-ups, with 4 of them being offensive tools and 1 of them being a defensive option that can throw opponents off, with the attack Gengar performs being dependent on what combination of buttons the player is holding during the initial dash. If the player doesn't input anything or simply holds the B button, Gengar will launch the opponent in the direction he was facing when he dashed. If the player holds forward in B, Gengar will appear and launch the opponent in the opposite direction he dashed. If the player holds up in B, Gengar will send his opponent soaring with an upward claw slash. Holding down in B will have Gengar appear in the air, all while performing a downward claw slash that will spike opponents on hit. Finally, if the player holds back on the control stick, Gengar will backpedal and reappear in the initial dash location, all while creating a short-range blast of energy to damage any opponent that made the mistake of advancing on him. All 5 of these options can prove invaluable to Gengar's game plan if used effectively, with the forward and backward strikes allowing Gengar to either force opponents out of position or get himself out of a corner. The upward slash can be used as a combo starter at low to mid percents and a great stock closer at higher percents, while the downward slash can also be used to start combos or end stocks if used off stage, as it's especially nasty against opponents trying to recover high. As for the retreating attack, this move will sport a high but fixed knockback growth that is guaranteed to throw opponents back into neutral range, but its very short range means your opponent will need to be right on top of you for it to work effectively, and unlike the other 4 attacks, which will lock onto the opponent's general position if they're close enough, this move's travel distance is always locked and can be punished heavily if your opponent sees it coming. This isn't a weakness exclusive to the retreat either, as should your opponent predict when, and more importantly, where you'll appear, the follow-up attack's end leg is more than long enough to leave Gengar wide open to some serious punishment. As a result, it's best to use this move to catch opponents playing around the neutral, or trying to keep you out of your effective damage range with projectiles, although you might be able to lean into this special at certain percents off of your normals. Just make sure your opponent has little to no chance to react to it. And remember, the sneakier, the better. Moving on to his recovery special, Gengar will make use of a quick yet powerful recovery option that, while it lacks in range, it more than makes up for it in being a dangerous stock closer and one of his best combo enders. Shadow Claw. With this, Gengar will take a brief moment to morph his arm into a monstrous appendage, and before his opponent can react, the devious Spectre will rush upwards into the air while performing a rising claw slash, with this powerful strike dragging any opponent in its path up with the player, before launching them skyward at the end of the move's damage path. In terms of usability, this attack covers a decent range, with the player being able to manipulate the launch angle in order to improve Gengar's horizontal recovery potential. But this move's true claim to fame is its launch power and ability to close out combos with some serious aplomb, if not close out stocks altogether. It also has the benefit of hitting in front of and over Gengar as he attacks, allowing the player to protect themselves from opponents attempting to two-frame them. And if you're being pressured, using this attack as an out of shield option might make your opponent think twice about carelessly approaching you again. Just be careful, as this attack is fairly easy to punish if your opponent sees it coming. Finally, for his down special, Gengar will utilize a dangerous command grab that can serve as one of his best ways to either turn the tide of a battle or run away with a fight altogether, as once you've got an opponent in your grasp, you'll devour whatever hope they have left in the most literal way possible. Dream Eater! With this, Gengar will cackle as he begins to emit a pair of hypnotic rays from his eyes, with these rays covering a short range in front of him and sporting a surprisingly long-lasting hitbox. Should any opponent be unlucky enough to be caught in Gengar's deadlights, they'll immediately be thrust into a state of deep sleep and left vulnerable, as it's at this point where the command grab truly begins. Once asleep, a portal will appear below the opponent as a large, monstrous hand will rise up and ensnare them in its grasp. Out of commission and unable to move, the hand will then start to squeeze the opponent tightly, wringing them dry as a large cloud-like bubble begins to form above their head. This is a physical representation of the opponent's dreams, a manifestation of their subconscious. But to Gengar, it's an all-you-can-eat buffet, and the devious specter won't hesitate to take what he wants as he absorbs the essence into his body, healing him for 50% of the damage dealt by the grab, and granting the player a brief respite. Once he has had his fill, Gengar will end the command grab by sending his opponent flying with a powerful claw slash, with this nasty wake-up call having the potential to kill at higher percents, and maybe even lower percents depending on how close you are to the ledge. A truly nasty attack, Dream Eater's ability to shift the flow of battle makes it the magnum opus of Gengar's moveset, and it's one of his best ways of capitalizing on poor placement and whiff punishing overly aggressive foes. But a move this strong is not without its weaknesses. This mainly comes in the form of Dream Eater's poor range and slow recovery speed, and while the hypnosis will work regardless of which direction the opponent is facing, the risk of getting hit yourself is just as large as the reward of landing the grab. And since it's such a destructive part of Gengar's kit, it's the attack that your opponent is always going to be on the lookout for. As a result, it's best to use this move sparingly, especially when your percent starts to go up, as impulsive decisions are something you can't afford to have when playing as a glass cannon. Next is the Final Smash, and for this, Gengar will embrace the power of his Gigantamax form in order to bring terror to his opponents in a whole new way, all before giving them a one-way trip to the other side. This is Gigantamax Prison of Souls. When the Final Smash starts, Gengar will take a brief moment to morph his arm into a clawed appendage, all before performing a rushing claw slash that will cover roughly 60% of your average competitive stage's length. This slash will harm any opponent in its path, but only the first opponent hit will face the full brunt of Gengar's wrath, as they're locked into a cinematic Final Smash. At this point, Gengar will sink down into his own shadow, and after a bright flash of light, this shadow will grow to an enormous size as it lets out a menacing howl of laughter, his opponent being left to cower in fear as a series of possessed household objects will float above their head, and before they have a chance to run away, they will be crushed under the effect of Gengar's exclusive Gigantamax attack, G-Max Terror. This spectral onslaught will root the opponent to the floor, preventing them from being able to move despite their attempts. And to end the Final Smash, Gigantamax Gengar will rise from the shadows and let out a wail, all before retracting his massive tongue into his mouth. The tongue that his opponent was unwillingly stuck to thanks to the effects of G-Max Terror. Once the opponent has disappeared into Gengar's body, the devious specter will let out one final fit of maniacal laughter as he sinks back into the shadows for a final time, all before reappearing back on the stage in his normal form, with his opponent nowhere to be seen. If the caught opponent is under 100% by this point, they'll be shown being spit out of a mouth-like portal, with this launching them up into the air a set distance before they tumble back to the stage. But if the caught opponent is over 100%, they won't be coming back at all, as they're now officially lost in the world beyond ours, cursed to wander for all of eternity. Unless they have another stock, that is, in which case they'll simply just respawn. For his victory theme, Gengar will follow in the same steps as the other Pokemon of Smash and use the main theme of Pokemon. While I'm sure there could be several potential victory themes that would make sense for this devious Shadow, the fact that he's one of the original 151 Pokemon means that this theme fits him more than half the playable Pokemon already in Smash. Victory animation number 1 will have a shadow extend out from below the camera, its form slowly morphing into that of Gengar's as it begins to cackle maniacally. As the shadow continues to laugh, the menacing form of Gengar will take shape and rise out of the darkness, his menacing gaze locked on the camera and refusing to break until the players cycle back to the character's select screen. Victory animation number 2 will show Gengar utilizing Phantom Force to appear and disappear in rapid succession, all before he reappears in front of the camera in order to frighten the cameraman. Gengar will then disappear in a puff of smoke and stay gone until the player cycles back to the character select screen. Finally, victory animation number 3 will show an empty victory screen, with the camera looking around in an attempt to locate our favorite ghost. After looking around for a short period of time, Gengar will pop up in front of the camera in an attempt to jump scare the players. And feeling proud of his accomplishment, Gengar will then burst into a fit of laughter, his gaseous body floating off the ground as he's unable to control himself. Gengar will keep this laugh going for quite a while, but if the player chooses to not go back to the character select screen, he'll stop laughing and attempt to scare the camera again, all before repeating his fit of laughter and continuing this spooky cycle for as long as the results screen is active. Taunt number 1 will have Gengar tease his opponent, with this having the Spectre pull on his eyelids and stick his tongue out. Whether he's trying to scare his opponent, or goat them into trying to hit him is unknown, but he sure looks like he's having fun. Taunt number 2 will have Gengar point at his opponent, all while letting out a hearty laugh. Whether it's an attempt to get your opponent upset, or you're projecting your own laughter as your opponent just walked into Dream Meter for the 5th time this match, I'd argue that there's few taunts out there that would make more sense for Gengar than this fantastic BM option. Finally, taunt number 3 will have Gengar create a shadow ball at his feet, all before he leaps up and performs a handstand on top of it, attempting to keep his balance with one arm. Another silly taunt, this animation is a direct reference to the Pokemon anime, as the Gengar seen in the Tower of Terror is seen balancing on a ball in the same manner. It's also the first time that we get to see Gengar in the anime, outside of the obligatory red and blue opening reference in the first episode, so it's quite memorable to fans of the series. As he is the original Ghost-type Pokemon, it's only fitting that Gengar's colors will make reference to the many Ghost types that would be introduced into the series following the release of Red and Green. From iconic Pokemon to new faces, Gengar will represent it all and more. And going in line with his nature as a poison type, Gengar's colors are designed to be bright to symbolize just how dangerous he really is. Much like most poisonous creatures have color patterns that symbolize their toxic nature. Color number 1 is Gengar's standard appearance, featuring his iconic shade of purple along with his large red eyes. While Gengar's shade of purple would change over the years, this combination of colors has been the Spectre's trademark ever since his debut in 1996. Color number 2 will change Gengar's body to a jet black while his eyes become a vibrant magenta, with this making reference to his old shiny color from gold, silver, and crystal. The visual design for Gengar in these games made the Pokemon come off as far more menacing than any of his future iterations, and it's a design that I admire a lot. Color number 3 will change Gengar's form to a deep blue while his eyes are changed to a muted red, with this making reference to the Pokemon Misdreavus. Misdreavus was the first Ghost-type Pokemon to be added to the series after the Gengar line, so it's only fitting that its status as the second generation's only Ghost-type Pokemon was respected. Color number 4 will change Gengar's body to a smoke gray, while his eyes remain the regular shade of piercing red. This is a reference to the Dusknoir line, the main Ghost-type line of Generation 3 that would go on to receive a third evolution in Gen 4. Color number 5 is a bit more of a drastic change, as Gengar's purple body will be changed to a bright orange, while his eyes will take on a shade of blue. This is in reference to the Pokemon Rotom, a Ghost-type introduced in Gen 4, and the Pokemon that will go on to be the basis for various forms of technology in the Pokemon world. Color number 6 will change Gengar's body to a snow white while his eyes will become a bright shade of yellow, with this referencing the Hisuian Zoroark line introduced in Legends Arceus. It can also be considered a reference to both the shiny versions of Mega Gengar and Gigantamax Gengar, but both sport different colored eyes. Color number 7 will brighten the purple in Gengar's body while his eyes will take on a bright green color, with this referencing the Pokemon Spiritomb. Gengar's attack trails will also be changed to a bright green as well, helping this color stand out from his regular color options. Finally, color number 8 will change both Gengar's eyes and body into a brilliant shade of golden yellow, with this making reference to Goldengo, a ghost type introduced in Gen 9. Gengar will even sport a gold-plated tongue when this color is used, just to give him the authentic Goldengo look. Ever since the early days of Smash, the Pokemon series has felt like it's been suffering from a common problem. Less so on the design front, and more on the representation front, as most Pokemon in Smash are in the game simply due to them being relevant at the time that their game came out. Sure, this is different for characters like Pikachu, Mewtwo, and the Cantonian stars for the Pokemon Trainer, and some characters grew to become popular fan favorites, like Lucario and Greninja. But while that's the case, it's unlikely that some of these choices would have been included if they weren't popular at the time. The point being made here is that there is a ton of Pokemon characters that can not only work as fighters, but have also continued to be fan favorites for years on end, and I feel that out of every Pokemon in that group, Gengar is definitely the one that stands out the most. Gengar has been around since the very inception of the series, and even after all these seemingly popular Pokemon have come and gone, Gengar continues to be held in high regard and be one of the most popular monsters in the series, both on a casual and competitive level. I truly feel that Gengar could be added to Smash Bros. At any point, and it would make complete and total sense, as he is a Pokemon that will always continue to stay relevant regardless of what generation Pokemon is currently in. Honestly, it's a mystery to me how he was never considered for Smash at all, as there's so much you can do with him, but the fact that he will always be popular makes you think that it could still happen someday, and if it does, I'll be sure to give him a try. Who knows? Smash 6 might just be his chance to make it big, especially since he finally became a member of Ash's team in the last season of the anime. He has also had a nearly flawless appearance record in the Pokemon series too, so chances are high that even if we do enter Gen 10 before the next Smash Bros. Comes out, Gengar will still be a part of what's to come. Whatever happens, he'll always be here, and he'll always have his fans that will clamor for his appearance in games like Smash. And I'm one of them. If you like what you saw, be sure to like and comment, as it not only helps with the algorithm, but also gives me a much needed boost in morale. If you want to see more, be sure to subscribe, and if you want to jump right into the other movesets that I've made, follow the link in the description to go to my Challenger Concept playlist. Just be sure you press that little bell icon, as doing so will leave you assured that you'll never miss a future upload. For now, I've been Felicia Fan, and I hope that you have a good one.